I was scrolling through Twitter the other day when I suddenly came across something that caught my attention in the best way possible. I know, I was surprised too. A combat playtest for an indie mech game called Ironwing Valiant Record of Astera, and the visual style looked very familiar. So, being a fan of both Valkyria Chronicles and Gundam, I jumped into their Discord to sign up for the playtest. And after that, one of the first things I saw was Valkyria Chronicles. It wasn't just my brain making the connection, the game is very much styled after Valkyria Chronicles, and even borrows a few gameplay elements that we'll talk about in a second. But so, I signed up, and a few days later, the playtest began. After booting up the game, the first thing we're treated to is a disclaimer telling us that the game is still in pre-alpha, which is something very important to keep in mind for the remainder of this video. This combat test is designed to find bugs and other things that can be improved for the actual alpha, the beta, and eventually the full release. There will be things that break, things that are a bit janky, and a lot of things that just aren't there yet. But there's still a lot of time left for these to be rectified, like this one lost pixel here, or the mech customization. The final game promises to have a lot of options, including changing the color, extra armor add-ons, and even something called field modifications, but for our combat pre-alpha test, we just get a handful of mechs, or Valiants as they're called, and the colors can't be changed yet. So my first Valiant had to go into combat with some mismatched colors, but so be it. For the weapons then, we can put a missile launcher or a cannon on each shoulder, a shield on the left arm, a gun and melee weapon for the right arm, which you can switch between during gameplay, and finally a sub-weapon for the chest. It's not as powerful as the main weapon, but it's great for finishing off weakened enemies or to be fired together with the other weapons. Unfortunately then, there's no dual wielding for the handheld weapons. Personally, I wouldn't mind giving up my shield for more Daka. And the button to fire that weapon could then simply be the block button. I don't need to block if I get to equip an extra bazooka or a shotgun. Also, I do like to touch that every weapon comes with its own bit of lore. The mech parts don't have this yet, but I'm sure it will be added later on. So on to the battlefield we go, and there's two things that I immediately noticed. The first is the immediate frame drop when everything has to load in. The game runs totally fine after this, as you can tell during the rest of the footage, but when I first began, it definitely gave me a scare about the overall performance of the gameplay. The second thing then was that it played surprisingly well with keyboard and mouse. Now, for the most part, I prefer keyboard and mouse over a controller, but for the Gundam games on computer, as well as Armored Core 6, a controller just felt like the way to go, and don't get me started on trying to control the Edelweiss with keyboard and mouse. But yeah, the moment the game began, I just got into the zone. The standard key layout was totally serviceable, although not remappable during the test, and thanks to the fast-paced combat, I was soon zipping around having a great time taking out enemies. And for some added visual flair, almost all of the scenery can be destroyed. And it doesn't just get destroyed by you firing at it. You're a mech, you can also destroy things just by walking on them. But then something hit me while I was having too much fun destroying the scenery. Am I destroying enemy infrastructure, or am I destroying my own infrastructure that I recaptured from the enemy? Ah well, time to make my way to the first mini-boss of the game. Did that missile just kill my game? So, as I was saying, time to make my way to the first mini-boss of the game, and this guy comes with some heavy-hitting melee attacks that will definitely keep you on your toes. The game features a blocking and counter system, but when given the option, I prefer dodging and shooting back. Especially when the melee system is kinda cumbersome. Between every hit, you're idle for like a second, leaving you open and vulnerable to attacks from other enemies. Fortunately for me, the mini-boss had to deal with the same delay, so while he's attacking my ally, I can get in some easy hits and fill up his stagger meter, which then leaves him completely defenseless. So yeah, for the most part, you'll see me using my That melee attack was so strong, it killed my game. Turns out, certain people, myself included, were experiencing crashes related to using Valiants classified as universal. And to circumvent this, I had to switch to the LAA Valiant, or in other words, the Transformable Valiant. Which is then the perfect time to talk about the boost mechanic. You can choose to either use smaller dodging bursts, which are the same for both Valiants, or you can use your afterburners for a longer boost to kinda like get from point A to point B. And when using the Universal Valiants, I did not like this long boost at all. It feels slow, and there's a weird delay between you stopping the boost and your Valiant actually stopping boosting, which is then why you'll see some pretty erratic movements after my long boosts. I'll react to an enemy or a missile, but my controls don't return to normal until a second later. For the transforming units though, the long boost works like a charm. You hit the button, you transform. You hit the button again, you immediately transform back into mech mode. And while transformed, there's no weird sluggish controls like with the Universal Valiants, and you can also still use all of your weapons. So fighting while transformed is totally doable, and it feels different enough to actually justify doing this. It's not as fast as I would have wanted, but this mode does allow for some interesting hit and run tactics. The only thing I would change is the targeting distance. I'm an airplane, but it doesn't lock onto enemies until I'm within like close combat distance. And talking about targeting distances, every weapon has a preferred range, and this is listed on the statistics tab when assembling your Valiant. The problem is, during combat, there is absolutely no indication of how far the enemy is. It would really help if the lock-on indicator also showed the distance to that enemy. Because here's another thing, I sometimes felt like my weapons were inaccurate, but that could have just been because I was using them outside of their effective range. And for the people paying attention to the screen, the range that you see doesn't have anything to do with the range. That is the ammo count for my ranged weapon. As much as I hate to admit it, it actually took a bit to realize that myself. Just like it took me longer than I'm willing to admit that those thin white lines at the bottom left and bottom right represent the ammo for my various weapons. And now, let's talk about the one very Valkyria Chronicles-inspired feature. By going into the command menu, you can use your or your allies' command points to give special commands. For example, you can set up a healing area to fix up your armor, or you can call in a mortar strike on an enemy. And I'm sure that in the full game, you'll get even more options. But so, with everything figured out and no more crashes, I was able to beat the playtest, and it positively left me wanting for more. It might just be a pre-alpha that still needs some polishing, but it is an extremely solid base that both looks amazing and was able to provide me with a lot of fun, for as short as the level actually was. So here's to hoping that the story portion of the game will be just as solid, because that is the other thing that this game is promising. A fast-paced mecha action game with a JRPG style story. What I can say right now is that this game is absolutely worth keeping an eye on, and you can currently wishlist it on Steam, which I will have linked down below. Plus, it was mentioned on the Discord server that a new demo should be coming out around January, which should closely resemble the final product. And as I'm writing this portion of the video, a list also just got published with all of the changes and updates that will be happening going forward that should also be included in that new demo. I'm really looking forward to being able to shoot down incoming missiles, because the first time I got missiles shot at me, my first reaction was to fire at them with my sub-weapon, which didn't do anything other than me getting hit with a missile shower. Oh, and make sure not to confuse the upcoming demo with the currently available public demo on itch.io. I will have it linked down below for those who want to try it out, but just keep in mind that this is a much older, less refined, and less balanced version than the version that was used for this current playtest. I will say though, I preferred how the afterburners worked in the old demo. But that has been all for this video on Ironwing Valiant Record of Astera. A very interesting looking mech game with a Valkyria Chronicles coat of paint. As always, a big thank you to the Patreon supporters. I hope everyone watching has a great day, and Squad 7, move out!